This video is brought to you by Captivating History. By the time ancient Egypt began crumbling, it was already one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Its early origins concealed in the shadows of ancient history. Egypt was a titan among its contemporaries when sheer age was considered. But over the centuries, this mighty nation faced many challenges, many of which threatened to completely destroy it. Time and time again, the Pharaohs managed to bring their civilization back to its feet, until it simply wasn't possible anymore. Faced with internal conflicts, natural and economic setbacks, and with the rise of new and powerful enemies, ancient Egypt entered a period of steep decline. In just a few centuries, it would fade out of memory, overrun by the unstoppable passage of time. The age of this civilization is one of the biggest insights into its character and its early successes. One of the world's oldest cultures, its first considerable history began in the early dynastic period, which began around 3100 BC. The power of this civilization was constantly on the rise. As a society, it thrived thanks to agricultural success. With ancient exploitation of the fertile valley of the Nile River, Egypt enjoyed a wealth of resources. This, in turn, helped with the rise of culture, writing, architecture, and military expansion. Still, history teaches that a nation's golden age cannot last continually. Time and time again, challenges appeared. From droughts to wars, they were always weathered and transformed into new prosperous ages. But each of these challenges would weaken Egypt step by step. Many historians agree that the controversial rule of Pharaoh Akhenaten, which began in 1353 BC, was a period from which ancient Egypt would never fully recover. Born as Amenhotep IV, this ruler later changed his name to Akhenaten and began a series of radical changes in Egyptian culture. He abandoned the old polytheism and instead adopted a new religion centered on the sun deity called Aten. Art was also greatly transformed in this unique Amarna period, and the pharaoh built himself a new capital along the Nile, shifting the power from the city of Thebes. These changes were hard to accept by the common people, and Egypt suffered in turn. Economic instability, unrest, and waning power levels were all noticed in the decades that followed. Most importantly, the Hittites, Egypt's noisy neighbors, rose in power during Akhenaten's rule and were left unchecked. This troubling period was eventually overcome. Several generations down the line, ancient Egypt once more rose to a lofty height during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. This powerful leader managed to subdue the Hittites at the decisive Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC, bringing peace and once more solidifying his nation's power. However, there were many indications that this period of respite was only a brief stop to Egypt's slow decline. Just a few decades later, after Ramses II, new enemies began troubling Egypt's integrity. Lured in by the nation's great wealth, Libyan Berbers began ravaging its western borders, while the infamous Sea Peoples invaded from the Aegean Sea. Rising to this challenge was Pharaoh Ramses III, considered by many the last great leader of Egypt's New Kingdom period. He defeated the Sea Peoples on both land and sea, but still lost many of his territories in Canaan. Libyan tribes returned once again, prolonging the ongoing conflicts for a time. Throughout these difficult wars, Egyptian society suffered. Tomb robbers were on the rise, civil unrest, corruption, and famine were widespread, and the land struggled through a series of droughts. Following the death of Ramses III, his numerous sons descended into a long and bitter struggle for the throne, which only deepened the difficult situation in which Egypt already was. By the time Pharaoh Ramses XI came to the throne, his power and influence were so weak that Egypt was de facto ruled by the high priests of the Temple of Amun at Thebes. The important contributing factor of Egypt's decline was the enormous toll that constant warfare had on the nation's wealth. Repelling all the invaders required complex campaigning and mass spending, which nearly drained the state coffers. This, coupled with the internal political divisions, was an open invitation for the neighboring empires, which grew in size and power, to invade Egypt. One such invading force was the Assyrian Empire, which began its conquest of Egypt in the 7th century BC. In a short amount of time, this powerful empire swept through the region, sacking Memphis and its sprawling temples and ravaging Thebes and other cities of Egypt. It was a difficult blow for its people and was made significantly worse by the erratic behavior of the Nile. At first, this river inflicted hardships with its low water levels and droughts, while later its levels rose and flooded the crops. In several decades, the Nile showed its inconsistent nature and inflicted heavy famine on the people that depended on it. Many historians agree that it was the Nile that contributed the most to the fall of ancient Egypt. By 653 BC, the Assyrians were ousted out of Egypt by the pharaoh Psamtik I and the Greek mercenaries he employed. Following this, Greek influence in Egypt spread rapidly from their city of Naucratis in the Nile Delta. With the Assyrians gone, Egypt once more took a breath of respite, albeit a very brief one. Around 525 BC, a new enemy appears. The mighty Persian Empire, led by Cambyses II, begins its vicious conquest of Egypt. In that same year, Pharaoh Psamtik III was defeated in the Battle of Pelusium and taken captive, ushering in the beginning of the Persian rule over his lands. The Persian supremacy in Egypt would last roughly until 332 BC, when a new change took place with a bold and powerful figure appearing in history, Alexander the Great. Alexander conquered Egypt with little to no resistance from his Persian foes and was greeted as a liberator and a great hero. He established a new and sprawling city at Alexandria, which became the place of great cultural development and was the regional center of arts and learning. But this golden period was also a major step in the downfall of ancient Egypt. Following Alexander's death, a Macedonian Ptolemaic kingdom was established in 305 BC by Ptolemy I Soter, one of his companions. After this point, ancient Egyptian culture was Hellenized to a degree, with their gods slowly merging with those of the Greeks and the hieroglyphic writing system slowly giving way to the Greek alphabet. The Ptolemaic dynasty faced many challenges in ruling Egypt. Although they made great efforts to retain the culture of the Egyptians, they were still facing civil unrest, internal conflicts, and an unstable political situation. In time, this increasingly unstable situation drew the interests of the powerful Roman Empire, which depended heavily on the import of Egyptian grain and other goods. After a brief struggle and the defeat of Egypt's last Ptolemaic ruler, Cleopatra VII, in 30 BC, this once powerful civilization was now a mere province within the great Roman Empire. By this time, ancient Egyptian civilization was effectively a thing of the past. The ancient pharaohs and monuments were archaic things of the hazy past. The great deeds of the old dynasty, the erections of the Great Pyramids, the core history of Egypt, all were forgotten through the many centuries and preserved only in the writings of the scholars. By the 1st century AD and the coming of Christianity, the creation of the Great Pyramid was 2,600 years in the past. The Romans were less considerate of the Egyptian culture than the preceding Ptolemaic dynasty. Culture and administration quickly became Romanized, and the Egyptian language and writing were falling out of use, step by step. When Christianity arrived in this land, its adherents were unwilling to compete with the native Egyptian faith. In time, the temples of the ancient Egyptian gods fell out of use. Some were transformed into Christian churches, while others were simply abandoned, left to be buried by the sands of time. And with their demise, the knowledge of the hieroglyphic writing system was lost to all. Time is a very cruel master. Ancient Egypt's story perfectly showcased how a civilization evolves over itself across the millennia. It was always challenging for the Egyptians to preserve their history over time, simply due to its great and venerable age. And due to this age, the internal conflicts, and the debilitating climate changes, the ancient Egyptian civilization could not effectively cope with the rapidly changing world around them. Century by century, stretched too thin and losing its original identity, it declined until it was no more, consigned to the mists of time. To learn more about the fall of ancient Egypt, check out our book, Ancient Egypt, a captivating guide to Egyptian history, ancient pyramids, temples, Egyptian mythology, and pharaohs such as Tutankhamun and Cleopatra. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.